Some mysteries in this world continue to baffle and terrify us long after they occur, and the Luna Park Ghost Train fire of June 9, 1979 is certainly one of them. This tragic event succeeded in claiming the lives of 7 people, including a father and his 2 children, yet it remains shrouded in mystery and conspiracy to this day. What caused the deadly blaze to erupt in the heart of the popular Australian amusement park? Was it a simple electrical malfunction, or was there something more sinister at play? Many theories have been put forth over the years, ranging from corporate corruption and negligence to underground criminal activity. In this bone-chilling video, we delve deep into the Luna Park Ghost Train fire, uncovering the shocking truths and terrifying conspiracies surrounding one of the most horrific events in Australian history. Located in the harbourside suburb of Milsons Point, New South Wales, Australia, on the northern shore of Sydney Harbour, Luna Park Sydney is a heritage-listed amusement park owned by the Luna Park Reserve Trust, an agency of the Government of New South Wales. The park boasts several attractions, the most notable being a steel-launched roller coaster known as Big Dipper 3 and the infamous Ghost Train roller coasters. Like most ghost-themed rides, the Ghost Train roller coaster was designed to give its riders a spooky and eerie experience. The roller coaster was constructed in 1931 at Luna Park Glenelg. It was then assembled at Luna Park Sydney and has stayed there since the park's first opening in October 1935 to the 1979 incident. The ride featured many turns and yanked riders along an electric track measuring 180 meters. Because it was appropriately spooky, with cobwebs hanging and scary figures leaping out at riders, it easily became a crowd favorite. Scare attractions such as dancing skeletons, an ape monster, a dragon's head, a cryptic Dracula, and a boxed skeleton lined the ride's walls. An artificial fireplace was included in the ride as well. As riders boarded the ghost train, the opening narration warned, "There are lots of ghosts in here. You'll shiver and quake in the ghost town." There would also be complete darkness for about 2 minutes and 30 seconds of the ride, which added to the eerie atmosphere. The Ghost Train roller coaster was a favorite of park thrill seekers and would usually draw very long queues. That was until the events of June 9, 1979 turned into a memorial of pain, death, and loss. On that fateful day, up to 35 people boarded the ghost train at around 9:40 p.m. The ride would have started as usual with its spooky introductory soundtrack before taking its riders into the dark and spooky tunnels for an experience of a lifetime. This time, however, something was different. While the ride was in session, some guests began to perceive smoke and also notice minute characteristics of fire. However, because the usual ride attendant wasn't on duty, and due to the darkness of the tunnels concealing the smoke, many ignored the smoke and chalked it up as part of the ride's special effects. It wasn't until around 10:15 p.m., when black clouds of smoke began to billow out of the ride's entrance and exit, that people started to come to terms with the fact that something was wrong with the ghost train. At this point, park attendants started the evacuation procedure, but they did not stop the ride. This might seem odd. After all, a fire was about to start. However, for whatever reason, instead of stopping the ride to evacuate the riders through the maze of corridors inside, they simply left the ride operating and concentrated on getting the riders out of their cars and away from the ride as soon as they emerged from the tunnel. This was a grave mistake. In no time, a fire started and, by the time emergency services arrived at the scene, it had already spread. The low water pressure of the fire hydrants within the park made it extremely difficult to fight the billowing fire. Firefighters had to use water from the harbor, which was obviously not ideal for a situation that had lives at stake. In under an hour, the entire amusement ride building was razed. It collapsed into a twisted pile of rubble before the eyes of all on the scene. Despite the loss of a fan-favorite ride, park attendants and fire service had taken solace in the thought that they had rescued everyone. However, they were all in for a devastating shock. After the blaze had stopped at around 11:30 p.m., 7 bodies were recovered from the wreckage. Their bodies were so badly burnt and disfigured that at first they were mistaken as part of the spooky animatronics that were placed all over the ride's tunnels. Investigators later determined that the 7 victims had gotten out of their vehicles to find an exit and escape from the fire on their own. If only they had remained in their vehicles, they would have eventually been helped out by a ride attendant. Among the dead were 4 13-year-old students of Waverly College Junior School: Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Michael Johnson, and Seamus Riley. The other 3 to lose their lives in the inferno were an adult man, John Godson, and his 2 sons, 4-year-old Craig and 6-year-old Damien. The Godsons were on vacation in Luna Park, Sydney when John Godson and his sons, Damien and Craig, decided to use their last few ride tickets on the ghost train. Jennings Godson, the boys' mother, described the split-second decision that left her as the family's sole survivor to news reporters, saying, "All of a sudden I got this thought that I wanted ice cream. It was just the most bizarre thing. I asked the boys if they wanted ice cream and they said no, so off they went with their father, and that was that. I didn't meet them there. They were gone." By the time Jenny returned to the ghost train to meet up with her family, the ride was already engulfed, and the bodies of John and the kids would be found later, burnt beyond recognition. To this day, the cause of the fire is still heavily debated. However, inquiries made after the incident reveal that Luna Park, Sydney had been warned that the very old ride faced a fire risk. The park was warned by the fire brigade in 1977 that the wooden tunnel the ride used did not have adequate emergency lighting or exit signs. The amusement park had also disregarded a recommendation to equip the ride's interior with sprinklers, and, even though these fire safety measures had not been put in place by 1979, Luna Park, Sydney was given another year to do so. The fire occurred barely 1 month after this 1-year grace period was given. The coroner's report determined that faulty wiring started the fire, and that the lack of lighting, exit signs, and the ride's confusing interior made it difficult for riders to get out of the tunnel safely. This was corroborated by a fire official who inspected the interior of the train in 1977. He described the tunnel as a dark maze, saying, "I would have gotten lost even with the lights on." The coroner, Kevin Anderson, concluded his investigation by saying Luna Park had failed its duty of care to patrons, but not severely enough to support a charge of criminal negligence. For the bereaved, however, this explanation was not enough. There were so many loose ends in the investigation results, and there were several claims by witnesses that the fire was a deliberate case of arson. In an interview with reporters, one eyewitness named Richard Visser recalled smelling kerosene while on the ride that night. Back in 1979, kerosene was widely used as a fire accelerant and was the leading culprit in intentional fires. According to Visser, he wanted to speak to the police the next day and tell them about the kerosene, but he was discouraged by the actions of the officer in charge. When I heard the news report the next morning that the fire was caused by an electrical fault, well, you just believe the police because the police are law-abiding people, he said. You believe what you hear from the police. In 1987, however, the investigation was reopened as part of a government inquiry into allegations of corruption within the New South Wales Police. Although no new information was presented, the inquiry found that the police investigation and the coroner's investigation into the incident were both insufficient. The documentary series Exposed, broadcast by ABC in 2021, later revealed that Inspector Doug Knight, the officer in charge of the investigation into the Luna Park fire, was a corrupt fixer who accepted bribes from criminals to obstruct and manipulate the investigation. Richard Visser claimed he decided to come forward after learning, through ABC's Exposed documentary series, that other witnesses also smelled kerosene inside the ride late that night, proving his theory that the fire had been started on purpose. Several other witnesses revealed that they had also observed a suspicious group of bikers at the park that night. Some bikers outside the ghost train were overheard by witnesses planning to use kerosene and matches to start a fire, with one saying, "You shouldn't have done that," and "Come on, let's split," after the blaze had already started. However, the witnesses all reported that the inspector, Doug Knight, disregarded all of their testimonies and went on to declare that there was no foul play in the accident, despite receiving similar statements from a sizable number of witnesses. According to Kathy Dewar, who was working at a food stand in Luna Park at the time, "For me, there were actually 2 tragedies. First, there was the fire itself. The second tragedy for me was the failed investigation, not having the truth come out. There was so much buried, so many facts distorted and hidden. I am definitely prepared at this point in my life to give a statement to the police, and I really resent the fact that I was not given the opportunity to do so at the time. Anyone who was at the park that evening should have been interviewed by the police, and whatever observations they had, what experiences they had should have been documented and recorded. So why would a bunch of bikers set fire to a ghost train roller coaster? And more importantly, why would the inspector in charge of investigating it want to cover it up? The most popular explanation is that a notorious crime boss, Abraham Gilbert Saffron, paid the bikers to start the fire and then had Inspector Doug Knight cover it up. It is believed that Saffron did this because he wanted the park's real estate for himself. In 2007, Anne Buckingham, Saffron's niece, claimed that her uncle started the fire, though he hadn't intended for anyone to be hurt by it. She would, however, later deny making this statement, effectively making sure the decades-long debate never ended.